want to walk beside me, be you to the ground, strung these reins around your head, rode you till you drown. Tried to be your savior, though I'm the one to blame, the one that heals, the one that kills, are one and the same. Oh, take me down, I'm gonna bury my shame. Oh, take me down, down to bury my shame. In my book of letters, keep a photograph, captures time so perfectly when I would make you laugh. What's that in the corner of your eyes, my dear? Is that look one of love, or is it one of fear? Oh, take me down, I'm gonna bury my shame. Oh, take me down, down to bury my shame.
The production systems that are in place in Canada are humane systems. We have the most rigid Animal Protection Act in North America. We have producers who recognize and stand up and say responsible animal care is foremost in our minds. We have producers who are willing to stand up and say the food you eat has been humanely produced. I believe that.
It's systematized cruelty, and it's profitable. And that's why it was developed in the first place. And now that you have people making millions of dollars or billions of dollars on that, they're going to argue to the end that it has to continue, that this is how we have to do it. And ironically, they argue that it's good for the consumer because now they can get chicken for cheap. The fact is, we're paying in many other ways. We're paying in our own sensibilities. We're paying by getting out of touch with the earth. We're hurting ourselves health-wise. We're hurting the environment. But I think this system has come to be because it's profitable and because people don't know about it. If people knew what they were supporting, and if they knew all the consequences of this system, they would choose not to support it.
"50 to 100 years ago, you had a very diversified farm with small amounts of different types of livestock. But you also had more people involved in agriculture. People basically provided food for themselves and for a small number of people. As the economy has changed, as trends have changed, as people become more urban and the numbers of people that live in urban areas rises, there is a need for more intensive livestock production.
Farmers, you say? Visited a farm lately and looked around? To you, they probably still work the land by hand, in the dirt from dawn to dusk. Besides, most of them are leaving the farm anyway. But with so few on the land, how do they produce more and more?
Now, we have intensive livestock operations. Intensive livestock operations are able to produce food for today's consumer in the demand, the amount that people ask for.
Yes, we do raise our animals in much larger numbers than what we were used to, but I don't think that any of those animals are in any worse condition. In fact, I think they are in a much better condition than they ever have been.
We're from the city. We're used to seeing that idyllic farm situation, and that picture is continually painted in our mind that that's today's operation. No, it's not. Agriculture has come a long, long way from those days when hogs would freeze in the cold, would be susceptible to predation and a tremendous amount of disease and illness. Those all have changed.
When I started investigating the factory farms, it would have been in the mid-70s. By scouring the farm magazines and finding factory farms that looked interesting, and I would track them down and go see them. Posing as a person, well, posing, not exactly. Actually, I was a person writing a book about agriculture. The idea was I'm doing a book on the latest technology, the cutting edge of animal husbandry, and I wanted to see the systems, and of course they were very proud of them then. I visited all types of factory farms for poultry, cattle, hogs, everything in the eastern half of the United States. 2 to 3 months on the road, several trips, 10,000 miles of traveling, taking photographs, and we spent entire days inside these places. We went underneath the houses into the manure pits to photograph the cage systems from underneath. We saw large egg factories, 5 and 6 and 7 birds to a cage. We went in hog factory systems where we saw pigs stacked in cages, stacked up 3 levels high, kept in the dark.
Many of the confinement systems that we see now came about following the Second World War, when there was a need to immediately produce a lot of food as cheaply as possible. A lot of money went into setting up those systems, and many of them continue to exist today.
I've been raised on a farm myself in the 40s and 50s in Missouri, and the conditions that I saw in the factory farms were really shocking to me. I really couldn't believe my eyes. It's really hard for most people to believe that there could have been such a radical change, a great shift in the way animals are raised from the farms of the 40s and 50s to the farms of the 60s and 70s and thereafter.
They've done what was asked from them in the 50s, that they produced cheap food. They've done it. And suddenly, I think that they feel the goalposts have been shifted. Oh yeah, not only do we want cheap food, but we want it produced humanely. They say, oh, wait a minute, you didn't. In the 1950s, when we were developing all these battery cages, stalls for sows, crates for veal calves, all these other things, you didn't say anything about humane. All the public were asking for was cheapness, efficiency. So, you know, I'm not surprised that they feel a bit taken aback. They're a bit defensive at the moment.
We're challenging what they're doing, and we're, as nicely as possible, asking them to get out of business. It's very hard to do that nicely, though. So we're asking them and encouraging them face-to-face and through other means, through the media and elsewhere, to look into other businesses, to look into growing broccoli.
So they've attacked the meat industry on the food safety side, on the health side, on the environmental side, and on the humane side, humane health side. And They know that today's consumers are nervous and anxious.
Now, it's quite popular among speakers like myself to scare beef producers by telling them that, in fact, they're going to be replaced by the soybean producer. Well, there's something in this, really, because, after all, there are products on the market now made from soybeans which taste and have the texture of beef and pork and ham and so forth. But let's not worry too much about it. Undoubtedly, there will be products like this on the market, but they're not going to change the industry too much. In any case, the packing industry is trying all sorts of new stunts. Freezing, freeze-drying, and so forth.
A couple times I've been on the wrong side of a fist. Never taken any punches, but I've been close a time or two. Yeah, we are animal rights people. We're vegetarians. And when we go to stockyards, to factory farms, to slaughterhouses, what we stand for is diametrically opposed to what those businesses stand for. So when we come into these facilities, the people get very upset. One reason is that when we go in there, we get videotape and pictures showing how horrible the conditions are, and when the public sees those, they don't want to support those industries.
You're not supposed to be taking pictures.
Why aren't we allowed to take pictures?
It's just company policy.
Why?
I don't know.
So we're not even on company.
I know that.
Ground, all I'm doing is taking pictures
I know
of
that.
the outside.
But we're not allowed. I'm gonna have to ask you guys to stop.
Can you give me more information?
It's because of animal rights activists. That's why.
So what are animal rights activists? What are they doing? Causing problems here? What kind of problems?
We've had bomb threats, various things.
Okay.
Okay.
I'll believe.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you.
I do approve of the use of animals, but I think that we as in human society have to think very long and carefully about how we use animals for all sorts of things, for testing and for biomedical research, and particularly in agriculture. But if overall we can show that these animals have a good life, a life in which they do not suffer, and if they have a painless death, then that satisfies me. And I think in general it satisfies a large part of society. But what about the lives that the animals live? Are they actually living happy lives? No, I think that many farm animals do not live particularly happy lives. I think that some farm animals at certain times of their life suffer. The normal way of looking after pregnant sows is to keep them in a stall. Sows naturally are very curious, they do a lot of exploration, and their normal lifestyle is exploring their environment, rooting and mouthing things and searching for food. And they're completely denied this when they're kept in sow stalls.
The idea of keeping expectant sows in harness is originally German and makes them much easier to handle. Special stalls prevent the sow from accidentally crushing the nursing piglets.
This is good.
We observe many pigs lined up, standing on concrete floors in fairly small, confined spaces where they were just really able to stand and lie down. Would that be acceptable practice and considered humane by the SPCA?
It would depend on how well they are addressing the welfare needs of the animals. Being in a stall in itself need not be either humane or inhumane. It depends a great deal on how those systems are managed. And whether or not they allow this pig to express what I call its pigness.
I have, seeing that pig farm the other day with the pigs in those small spaces and indoors, and they were standing on concrete, rows and rows.
Were they squealing?
Our work essentially focuses around whether or not an animal is in distress. If it is not in distress, then we have to trust that these management systems are appropriate.
Most people assume that humane societies will take care of problems if there's a problem. They assume that laws will protect animals from horrendous cruelty if it exists. But the fact is, laws have been weakened to allow the cruelty to exist.
There are regulations that the Food Administration can trot out and show you and say, yeah, there's humane treatment. They have enough water, they have enough light, they have enough food. We even kill them in a way which isn't creating an undue suffering. And that's the standard of being humane. And everyone goes home feeling fine, well, then I don't have a problem with that. The animal rights activists are just lunatics. They just want a cause, that's all. One of the questions that I have is, what does humane mean?
We know that they have other real emotions, they have other real feelings and needs which may be described as psychological as much as physical. And we want to see their psychological needs met. But that we have to handle in a different way. Psychological well-being is something that no one has attempted to put a firm definition on.
I don't think that anybody has the right to come up and say, well, these chickens are happy or they're unhappy, because until they can actually define to me what those stages mean, it'd be very difficult to put a sort of a real finger on it and say, yes, this is good and this is bad, this bird is unhappy or happy, or it's more a level of well-being.
Let me give you an example of a farmer. He raises egg layers. He calls the chickens his girls. He likes to hear them sing, he says. And I've heard this numerous times. They know that they're happy because they can actually hear them singing, they describe it as.
When we see the geese flying overhead, heading north to wherever they're in the summertime going to nest and then going back south, and we see the spirit of that geese in its place the way it was intended, the beauty of that, the absolute rightness of that must be what we first concern ourselves with. The intent of the creation to put the geese in that context is what is right. So if we manipulate that right and we can find the geese, what are we doing with that? What are we saying with that?
When animals are in a disturbed social situation, as poultry and hogs are in the factory, the crowding and the unnatural herd and flock size produces what farmers call cannibalism, which is intensified fighting among the birds or the pigs. And they call it cannibalism because in some cases some of the animals are killed and they will actually be eaten by the others. It's a standard practice in these industries to control this, not by giving the animals a natural habitat, a natural social situation, natural densities, that would be costly. They would have to reinvent the factory farm. So the solution to it is to mutilate the animals. Birds' beaks are cut off, and hogs, the tails are cut off because that's where the cannibalism usually starts. So the solution for the factory farmer to the social disturbance and the behavior disturbances that they've created, the solution is to mutilate the animals routinely.
On the face of it, if we do this, if we chop off part of the bird's beak, it doesn't feather peck. It tries to, but it's not able to, and it certainly can't cannibalize another bird. Therefore, its welfare is protected. Well, that is true, but to be balanced against that is the fact that through work that I have done and been associated with, it's been shown that it's not a trivial operation.
Shouldn't the conditions of the birds be improved so that the cannibalism is not a risk?
I think it's important to reach out and talk to people who are very involved with animal behavior and studying that. In
Because
Canada,
in effect,
we
it
have
is a response to a human-created problem,
That's right.
right?
Yes, that's correct. Yes.
Because the
Yes.
layers used to be able to get away from each other.
Yes.
That's why it was.
Yes.
They have studied the nature of these birds, the genetics of the birds. Cannibalism isn't something that has happened. It's something that is natural with the birds. Pecking order. You hear of pecking order. I mean, I grew up in the farm and I saw it. And I saw what happened in a small flock of chickens, egg-laying chickens on our farm. And so it's not something unusual.
I have a problem simply overcoming problems by chopping parts off of our animals, and whether it's debeaking or tail docking or dehorning or desnooding in turkeys, it's a very crude solution to a problem.
Often there's terms that are used in agriculture or have been exaggerated by those outside of agriculture and have a very negative, leave a very negative message in the minds of consumers. A very good example would be beak trimming that has been called debeaking. And beak trimming describes what the process is.
It's called debeaking, which is not true. The beak is not taken off. It's also called beak trimming, which is not true, because it's not like trimming our fingernails or trimming hair. The bird uses its beak the same way as we use our hands. So there are a lot of nerves going into the beak. When we chop it off, we cut through these nerves, and we cause both acute pain and chronic pain.
When my children ask me, I say, it's like having your fingernails trimmed.
We're hearing more of this term agribusiness.
A very good example of how we feel the animal rights industry has denigrated the agriculture industry is by using the terminology factory farming.
factory farms. I think that's a sensational term. We do, I think the best term would be agribusiness or intensive livestock production.
This is the longest enclosed building of its type in Alberta, specially designed as an egg factory.
A big commercial feed yard handles thousands of head of cattle a year, and it's a highly scientific beef factory.
Factory implies greed, it implies a manager sitting somewhere else, and robotics. We have people who provide hands-on care for those animals 24 hours a day, rain or shine, no matter what the weather. That's not a factory farm.
With an auger screw conveyor linked to a time clock, cattle are fed every 4 to 6 hours. No human effort is now required as the auger fills and dumps mechanically. Some farmers specialize in feeding only, a one-man operation for almost any quantity.
The language that's used describes the animal strictly in terms of its profitability or as a living machine. For example, hens, chickens, female chickens that produce eggs, or the industrial term is layers. In the dairy industry, they describe cows, especially high-producing cows, as milkers. They're not seen as an animal, they're seen as a productive machine, and they're described as such. Pigs is the same. The hog industry often refers to its pigs as porkers.
When the side of pork comes from the cooler to the cutting line, the ham is first removed. As we follow the ham, one man saws through the bone. Another man makes the cut. The ham then goes by conveyor to the next operation, cutting off the foot, and finally it is trimmed and graded for weight and quality.
A key word in agribusiness is performance, how the animal performs, basically how the animal converts feed into food, as they say.
The breeder must nominate a sire and send 10 steer calves.
And you think about everything from how a car performs to something which suggests that they have some choice in the matter, like they perform. They choose not to perform.
Hardiness is exemplified by those animals which carry on their relentless production assignment year after year with minimum assistance.
So there's a weird way in which they're almost anthropomorphized and de-animated into a machine simultaneously in the term perform.
If you have a calf that performs very well and you have another calf that performs not so well, now, does this calf perform poorly because its parents were rather poor for this particular?
Yes, I think the basis of modern farming, like the basis of modern anything, is science and technology.
Converting living systems into machines for capital accumulation that merely are commodity producers wouldn't be possible without the instrumentality of a reductionist science that achieves two things for you. On the one hand, it kills your ethics of compassion, because reductionism transforms a living system into inert parts that are put together from the outside. Treatment like machines, treatment like atoms. And that reductionism then creates the ethical anesthesia that basically says that you don't have to worry about ethics of your relationship because this is just a bundle of matter which is in your hands to play around with. It's as if you're playing with plasticine.
Every day brings us closer to the time when the push-button farm computer theory becomes a reality.
And it also gives you the actual manipulative power to get more milk out of a cow, to produce more lean meat in the cows, to stock cows in smaller spaces, to slaughter them quicker. These are the systems through which capital uses reductionist science for capital accumulation and appropriation of life from beings who have a right to their own life.
We have taken a jungle fowl in the case of the chickens and a wild turkey in the case of the domesticated turkey, and we have bred and bred and bred, made into these birds over and over again so that they will exhibit certain specific production traits at the expense of the well-being of the animal or the species.
Now, if you want to have red cattle, all you do is select cattle to go into your herd to mate, which are red. And
pigs today have been genetically altered to grow fast and to grow large, and they're usually slaughtered at about 220 pounds at 6 months of age, which is a very young animal. Here at Farm Sanctuary, we have pigs that are several years old, and of course we don't kill them here, so they've continued to grow. These animals are so big, their feet can barely support their bodies. By manipulating these animals genetically, the livestock industry is also creating problems. And these are problems that these animals obviously have to live with and suffer as a result of.
I'd like to talk about the 3 most important traits that we have to select for in beef cattle. Cow productivity. How many calves does she turn out? How heavy are the calves at weaning time? Now the next most important thing is rate of gain. We're very impressed with rate of gain as the second most important trait that we select for. After all, it's pounds of beef we're in the business to sell. And then third is carcass merit. Not so much whether it's got a full rump or not, but how fat it is. Whether it's fat enough for the trade, and whether the carcass is big enough or small enough for the particular trade. So here are the 3 traits that we're very interested for. There isn't much left after you've selected for these 3 types of traits in a performance.
The group that cloned Dolly, before that engineered a sheep called Tracy. And Ron James, the owner of Protein Pharmaceuticals, who owns the patents on this group of animals, basically said 2 things in a debate with me that I cannot forget. He said, 1, sheep are just furry little factories producing specialized chemicals for us. And the second thing, the patent that they had was for a mammalian bioreactor. The cloning of Dolly, which had been based on killing something like 272 other dollies that didn't work out right, which didn't make the news, this destroyer and this destructive science was positioned on the covers of magazines where Ian Wilmot, the scientist, and of course they hid the corporation that financed Ian Wilmot. The scientist stands face to face with Dolly, and the caption was, "The creator and the created." This absolute cosmic confusion about who's the creator, what is creation, what is life, is an absolute disaster for the future of humanity. It is really possible to treat animals as fellow beings, as not, as was said during the Industrial Revolution and Scientific Revolution, inferior creatures over whom man must establish his empire, but really as the earth family in which we are all in a democracy of life. The kind of knowledge that that takes is a very different kind of knowledge, because it's a knowledge that cannot be purely quantified. Life organizes itself. Life creates itself. Our relationship should be a relationship of compassion, which leads to a deeper science of complexity, self-organization, ecological understanding of what the animal is, and a science of respect and reverence for the other.
Aircraft require constant maintenance and repairs. Worn-out parts must be replaced. In the human body, replacements are also necessary, and these replacements are supplied by the proteins in the food. The protein in your ration is plentiful. It is found particularly in eggs, cheese, meat, and milk. As long as you take these foods each day, you will receive plenty of the materials necessary for the repair of your body. If you fail to eat these 4 foods, repair will not take place, and your body will resemble a damaged aircraft. Its value to you and
one of the remarkable thoughts of the 19th century was that the reason that British had prevailed in colonizing was because they were beef eaters, and that the savages, the people of color, who were vegetable eaters, didn't have the strength.
When mighty roast beef was the Englishman's food, it ennobled our hearts and enriched our blood. Our soldiers were brave and our courtiers good, Oh, the roast beef of old England.
Proper food is a weapon of war. Due to vast shipments of food to our fighting men overseas and to our allies, temporary shortages of some
In European cultures, meat became something that people wanted to eat every day. And this happened because the rich and the royalty were eating meat every day. And everyone aspires to eat meat every day, but there was not that much meat available. But then people immigrated to the United States, and suddenly they were writing home saying, we eat meat 3 times a day. Anybody could eat meat in the United States. And of course you would desire it.
Where I'll be staying at the end of that lonesome trail, as I ride into the twilight, my last roundup I've begun.
It has such a status having to do with wealth and having to do with first world life, and it creates this desire.
If you compare domestic animals such as cows and chickens and pigs, I think it certainly is a custom that those are the animals that we eat. We do not eat dog in this part of the world, not that I'm aware of. And I think that's because we have deemed to see dogs or cats as our friends, and you don't want to eat your friends. On larger scale production, such as what we have here, we don't necessarily have very strong personal feelings towards the individual chicken. And so you do remain somewhat more detached. However, that doesn't mean that you are not concerned about their welfare.
I remember going to a chicken farm one time where they were raising battery caged laying hens. And they would send them off by the tens of thousands. A truck would come and take them off to the slaughterhouse. But one time a chicken got out, and this chicken was running around the farmer's house. And that farmer said that, you know, her heart got soft and she started feeding the chicken. And so this chicken became sort of a pet of hers because, again, this was an individual animal that she could identify with. When they're not known as individuals, I think the cruelty becomes normalized and the death becomes the mortality rate, and there are certain mortality rates which are considered acceptable. And instead of looking at those as individual animals who have died, they're looking at them as a percentage of the production units that are no longer productive.
Our culture blinds us to seeing things that if you were from, for example, India, you wouldn't eat cow. What we think is normal in terms of when it comes to what we eat is a cultural construct, a social construct, which society encourages us. and reinforces us to accept.
A few appetizing spork dishes are spork and eggs to start the day, spork hors d'oeuvre for party occasions, spork and macaroni and casserole, spork and sweet potato patties with green salad. Cold or hot, spork hits the spot. Spork, the meat of many uses.
I was thinking about some of the animal rights issues at the time in my head, so I said, of course I would never eat a dog or a cat. But then I thought, well, why would I eat a pig? You see, if I knew a pig the way I knew my dog, I would have loved the pig just as much as I love my dog. So how can I eat a pig? You know, how can I eat a cow? I knew real quick, as it were, that part of what made it possible for me to blindly be a consumer of dead animals is I never thought to think about what it would be like to know them. But I think everybody has that capacity to stop and think and say, if I knew you, I wouldn't eat you. And in some ways, it really is that simple.
Now here at the farm, we have 400 animals that have been rescued from factory farms. And like every other animal, human and non-human, each of them is an individual. Each of them has their own personality, so to speak. Hilda, you know, she's a sheep. She's almost 10 years old now. But we found Hilda on the dead pile behind Lancaster Stockyards in Pennsylvania. She had been trucked several hours, and during the journey, she passed out. And when the livestock trucker arrived at the stockyard, he just unloaded all of the walking animals and then drove his truck around to the dead pile behind the stockyard and dumped off the dead and unconscious animals, including Hilda. So here Hilda was thrown on this pile of dead animals. As we approached the pile, it was a hideous sight. You have dead cows, dead pigs, dead sheep, all piled together. And in this pile, we see a sheep lift her head. We were shocked, as you can imagine, and we took her to the nearest veterinarian, and as he started giving her shots and whatnot, she stood up and stood all the way home. Billy Martin, he's got a lot of spunk. He actually liberated himself from the stockyard by jumping over the fence and making a run for it. Some of our members found him running around the streets of Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and he ended up at our farm. And he still lives here today, and he still has a lot of spunk, which a lot of visitors can attest to. And he's got a big rack of horns on him, too. In other cases, we've had animals here, and some of the stories are kind of sad. We had a pig named Hope, who was a crippled pig. We got her from a stockyard, and she was just left there to die. She had a broken back leg. But anyhow, we had a pig that came in and really bonded with Hope. His name was Johnny. The two of them used to stay together all the time, and whenever other pigs would kind of bug Hope, Johnny'd be there to protect her. They were just really good friends. Hope was a lot older than Johnny, and her mobility decreased as time went, and it got to the point where we decided she should be put to sleep because she was not tending to enjoy life anymore. So we did put her to sleep. And a couple weeks later, Johnny died. You know, we think he probably died just because he missed her. There was no sign that anything like that would happen, but it's, I think, an indication of how much these animals feel.
Every shred of evidence that we have supports the view that they are fundamentally like us in the sense that they're complicated psychological creatures with an emotional life, with memories, expectations, families, just rich, rich, rich. This is what Darwin saw more than 100 years ago when he says that the mental life of these animals differs from ours in degree and not in kind.
There may be other emotions that animals experience. For instance, fish experience changes in pressure and changes in ionic content of the water. I have no idea what that must be like. A big section of our farm animals are what are called ruminants. They have very complicated stomachs that are designed to digest cellulose. I think that the process of rumination cuts the animal off. The rest of the world seems to go by, and I have no idea what an animal feels like, what it experiences while it's ruminating. I mean, it's very interesting that human beings use the term ruminate without really knowing what an animal experiences. But at least we should start with the things that we know about. We know about pain, we know about fear, we know about frustration. I think we should at least leave ourselves open to the possibility that animals can suffer from these states. The evidence strongly suggests that they can.
One of the ways that we fiercely protect the boundary between humans and animals is to believe that somehow the human suffering is concretely different than animal suffering. It was during the time when we were challenging the Contras in Nicaragua and what was going on in El Salvador. And I remember standing up and saying, well, let's take these home with us and not eat turkeys at Thanksgiving. And many people react and say, this is an insult to human suffering. And so one is not supposed to compare or to cross that boundary and to say war and meat eating are very alike. It's just the species is different.
Well, by speciesism, I mean the idea that we have an attitude of prejudice against taking seriously beings of other species. The very use of the term speciesism is designed to make the point that this is another ism like racism or sexism. So the comparison there, we have a more powerful group which historically has defined itself as the most valuable or the naturally ruling group, and the others, the outsiders, as inferior, subordinate, and so on. This time it's the whole of the human species which regards itself as morally superior to other beings, having more value than other beings, entitled to exploit other beings for our own benefit.
Every female must conceive during a 65-day breeding period. Calve as a 2-year-old and wean a good calf. No exceptions or be culled.
In reality, cattle, lambs, and other livestock are grass turned into meat. In utilizing
the important idea for the purposes of the animal rights movement is the idea of what philosophers call a negative right. This is a right of non-interference, non-invasion, non-harm. And what the animal rights people are really trying to do, what we're trying to say, is that the arguments are in place, they're there, they're compelling, they're persuasive, that make the case that these rights extend to other animals.
If we ask people whether humans are all equal, they'll say yes, but if we then ask them why, the answers rapidly stop being coherent. I think that's because people often look for some sort of factual equality, whereas in fact we're not the same. We do differ, but yet we say we're equal. Well, I think what that shows is that the principle of equality is not a principle of factual equality, but a moral principle that is essentially saying all humans have interests, and it's irrelevant to how we should consider those interests, whether that human is male or female, black or white, Christian or Muslim, or any other differences that you might have. If that's the principle that lies behind our very important idea that all humans are equal, then we have to say, well, non-human animals have interests too, and those interests should also be equally considered. That means not necessarily that animals ought to be treated equally with humans, because their interests will differ.
It's their opinion that it is morally wrong. I guess as a producer of animal foods, my opinion is that it is not wrong. They have been proven from many, many different sides to be very beneficial to humans. I believe that we're not necessarily that we aren't doing anything ethically wrong or morally wrong. I don't know how maybe to necessarily say why we are right and we are wrong. We are fulfilling a demand.
This whole concern is trivialized and ridiculed, which keeps it out of discussion. If they never regard this as a serious subject, then of course they never have to deal with it, do they? So that's one of the self-protective devices that the larger society really uses to keep from having to address what we would call the animal question, which is the whole question of our relations with animals. How are they to be used, if at all? What are the terms of trade to be with the animal part of the natural world?
Don't you cry, go to sleep, little baby. When you wake, you shall have all the pretty little horses.
We're marginalized, we're ridiculed, we're reduced. The stereotype of an animal rights person or a vegetarian is as somebody who's kind of loony, you know, of the fringe.
Way down yonder in the meadow lies a poor little lamb behind the plier, picking at his side. Poor little thing crying, man.
The movement into violence was a serious mistake. That very, very tiny movement, maybe the number of people involved you could count on the fingers of your hand out of all the millions involved in the movement. It's wrong because it's going to hurt people, and it's stupid because it's going to lose the sympathy of the public.
On the one hand, we're terrorists who are blowing up things left and right when really we're not. And on the other, we're Bambi lovers who just saw that movie one time too many and became all emotional.
Don't you cry, go to sleep, little baby. When you wake, you shall have all the pretty little horses. Lexington Bay, Dapple and Gray.
Initiatives by the animal rights industry inflame emotions and get people feeling guilty about eating meat. By using this emotional approach, rational thinking is dissolved.
And what helps us make choices is not always because rationally or analytically this is the best thing to do. What helps us make those choices is that we feel about those things. We feel about life itself. We have emotion and we care and we love life itself. That is entirely human. That is fully human. That is fully using our gifts as it was intended.
By using emotional tactics, they've hit the nerves. I would say that the agriculture and the food production side take a let's be accurate, let's give the facts, let's be consistent in our information, and not fall into that trap of inflaming or heightening emotions.
Well, basically we say
sheep, like buffalo, cows,
Mm-hmm.
and the little meat on the back of their heads and stuff.
Okay. We want to say you are eating a dead animal. This is a dead animal's corpse. Whenever we say that, what's interesting is that we're accused of being emotional. All we're doing is stating the truth. But the truth is, has an emotional quality about it. The truth is not something that we would rationally want to encounter. I am eating a dead body? Who would want to be eating dead bodies? I think one reason that we have such difficulty bringing the issue of meat to a consciousness is because food itself isn't supposed to be too closely analyzed. A meal has a beginning, a middle, and an end. It begins with soup. It doesn't begin with dessert. And then the entree is meat with its accoutrements. So when you disturb that meal, you are disturbing not only the meal, but whatever that meal represents. Vegetarians come along and they say, oh, take out the center of the meal. And people think, what's there to eat? In fact, back in 1974, the New York Times Magazine did a thing on Thanksgiving with a Conscience. And all it showed were 2 peas, 5 pieces of rice, and one other little thing. Like, this was a meat eater's nightmare. The Thanksgiving with a Conscience was barely eating. So in fact, right now I'm working on a book called Living Among Meat Eaters, because I've now realized that most of us thought that becoming vegetarians, the hard part was the nutritional. And now we all know that's not the hard part of vegetarianism. It's very easy to live without animal products, without dead animals. You can have delicious food, wonderful cakes, without eggs, without milk. We don't need it. The difficulty has not been the nutritional issue. The difficulty has been the social issue. How do we interact with this immense commitment to eating animals?
If you believe that you do not wish to eat meat, you're entitled to that belief.
We've got a big commitment in our culture to maximizing pleasure. And suddenly we're coming along and we look like we're Puritan neo-Orthodox, saying you can't have that pleasure.
Others believe that and want to eat meat. You should respect that person's beliefs as well.
My response is that pleasure is a result of privilege. That pleasure is harm. What you see as pleasure is somebody else's harm.
Which came first, the demand of consumers for a particular type of product? Do you think that demand came first, people asking for more and more of this particular type of animal, and the industry responding to that market demand? We have to go back to society and say, what is it that society has asked for?
In the 1950s, great pressure was put on producers, the farming community in general. Cheap food. That was all that mattered, cheap food. And for goodness sake, no one achieved that better than animal agriculture.
The startup cost of a typical large animal slaughter plant would be $50 million and upwards. The cost of construction of these places just goes straight up. Same with the factory facilities. And what that means for the animals is that they have to cover the cost of overhead. So it basically means more intensification. That is to say, larger numbers of animals moving at a higher rate of speed through the place.
I believe that society today wants reassurance, first of all, that they have a safe source of food. Secondly, but More importantly, in all the studies that have been done, when it comes to choice, price is the guideline. We want to be able to buy our food inexpensively so we can buy a new CD or we can go on the internet at any cost, so we can have our cell phones. And we're angry when we have to pay more for food.
The freedom of the humans to get food and the cattle to get food, and for the two to live in symbiotic harmony, is a very real possibility within ecological systems of agriculture. This has been made antagonistic in two ways. Firstly, by changing the feed patterns of cattle, putting them in competition with humans, so that the factory farms of the affluent countries are literally taking away grain from the poor people of the world.
Canadian livestock consumes millions of tons of grain a year. Such mills provide mixed...
You create artificial contradiction between poor human beings and animals in rich countries. And then you set up a second kind of contradiction between consumers and the animals, by basically trying to argue that if you want cheap food and cheap meat, this is the only way we will provide it. It's through factory farming. But that notion of cheap meat and cheap food is based on externalizing the costs that make it a very costly way to produce food.
One hot dog, please. Regular hot dog? The flesh that you have on your bones is the flesh that's walking around, you know, on the bones of the deer, or on the bones of the whale, or on the bones of the goose that's flying overhead. And understanding that in a spiritual sense is that without that life form and without the integrity of that connection and acknowledgement of that, what are we? What is the human being if they cannot see the reverence in that and the sanctity in that and the sacredness in that? What have we come to?
A downer is an animal which is ill for one reason or another and lies down, goes off its legs, and is not able to get up again. If it's in that state, it's usually extremely ill.
They call them down because they're down on the ground. And the way these animals are typically moved is by dragging. So they usually just take a chain, put the chain around the cow's leg, and drag them onto a truck or onto a trailer, and then take them to the slaughterhouse. As long as these animals are still alive, they can be used for human food. And that's why the industry is reluctant to humanely euthanize these animals.
The handling of unfit animals is a very grave concern. It has to be handled immediately and as humanely as possible. And when it isn't, something should be done. Either the people should be charged and fined, and the industry does not tolerate the inhumane handling of unfit animals.
But to the best of our knowledge, they are being dealt with as appropriately as any others.
What should happen to it is that it should be humanely euthanized on the spot. It should be killed humanely. And then it doesn't matter what happens to the body. The financial aspects that has driven people to do this, to move animals very inhumanely, to drag them, to winch them onto trailers so that they can be transported live to slaughterhouses. And that's unacceptable.
Every square inch of additional rib eye area means at least $4 extra carcass cutout value in a 600-pound carcass. The whole beef cattle business evolves around the principle of obtaining the most pounds of beef per cow bred.
People are involved with raising food to earn a living. And economics is often difficult for today's consumers to say the economic factor comes into play first. I will say to you that the humane handling of animals takes priority over the economics.
No producer will make changes unless it's economically viable to do so in the long run. I think that there's always a few exceptions to that, but in general, unless it really makes a large benefit to the hen and that gives me some sort of measurable return, changes won't be made.
That's tomorrow, same time and station, for This Business of Farming.
I do believe that animal welfare is important to these people, but at the same time, they are caught in a system that is economically driven, and it requires that they use certain husbandry techniques at this time in order to compete.
The meat and dairy industries are so powerful and have been pushing their agenda for so long, they have some very deep roots everywhere. The stock market has its roots in livestock market. Farm animals, large ones, are called livestock. They have deep roots in the school system. They provide literature for the schools to teach the children a certain way. Then they have roots in the judicial system. They have roots in the legislatures.
The meat industry that we have today are spending millions and millions of dollars
And they understand that if you're going to perpetuate the myth that we have, they have to start early. If you take McDonald's, Ronald McDonald Playland, telling kids that hamburgers come from the hamburger patch, there's no truth to that. But what would it be like if McDonald's said to kids, you know, really a hamburger is dead cow? What would happen if people had to go up to the counter and order a dead cow burger instead of something that sounds as glorious as a Big Mac? And it's not only McDonald's, but it's the dairy industry, and it's putting the information into our schools, the wonderful coloring books of how wonderful the animals have it and how great it is and how much they enjoy being out there. And as they are well taken care of and having a good time, then all of a sudden they end up going very happily to the slaughterhouse. Well, I will tell you right now, I have seen thousands and thousands of animals go to the slaughterhouse. I have never seen one of them that ever went running, skipping, and jumping and saying, "Yippee skippy, I'm going to be a McDonald's hamburger."
Part of what is at stake here, obviously, is power and wealth and property, and anything that threatens that is something that we're going to try to, those who have the power are going to try to prevent from threatening them. So I think that we should think of the relationship behind the scenes, as it were, between humans and other animals, is that every day anyone is a party to the death of an animal. It's an exercise in human power over property, over a thing.
At last, the steers have nearly fulfilled their destiny. On the beef dressing floor, the dressed sides move.
There is a law in Canada which says that all animals should be humanely killed, which means that they should in some way be rendered unconscious before they are killed. Chickens, and to a large extent pigs, are made unconscious using electric shock. I think that the way that we do that is open to question, and I think there may be better methods for doing that.
The idea of humane slaughter is like an oxymoron to me. It's like military intelligence, you know. I mean, the two ideas don't go together very well. But even if there was, by some wild invention, some way of killing animals without causing them pain, still wouldn't justify killing them.
If a cow had a choice of one road that went to the slaughterhouse and one road that went to the grassland, that cow would probably go and want to live. You don't think?
Well, you know, you always have to think. Now, if I was an old cow, and we as humans cannot put ourselves in animal circumstances. But I believe that if they had their choices about whether they'd like to go out to the grassland and be surrounded by a wolf or a couple of coyotes and meet their death that way, versus being humanely transported to a slaughter facility where they are humanely and instantly killed, what choice would they take? I can't speak for that animal, but one wonders.
The animals who are raised for food have had their biography ended. They had a life story. They were a somebody in the world rather than a something in the world. And their story was unfolding, and we terminated it. We ended it. We killed them before their time, before the fullness of their life.
Relatively healthy, but she's a milk cow. Maybe because of her age, or she might have had too many babies. So her milk production would drop.
Right.
It drops so far, you bring it in automatically.
the industry, the poultry industry, they say that everything is all right and that there is no need for any improvements. I am doubtful about that, but one way or another, to settle this issue, I think that the way to go would be to have a survey and to have a look at chickens going through a slaughter plant. But the poultry industry are rather reluctant to give me access.
I believe that to learn about slaughter facilities, you need to talk to people like Temple Grandin, who has worked so diligently to address concerns and work with the packing industry, as we call it, to constantly improve animal well-being. I think you're going to learn more that way by walking into a plant and expecting the doors to be opened to you. Security.
But I'm regarded with some suspicion in the poultry industry because I'm making these inquiries. It's not with a view to shutting down processing plants, it's with a view to trying to make things better, more humane for the animals.
So it has to be a trust circumstance. So I ask you to prove to us how we can trust you, because in fact, in the past, because of what the animal rights industry has done, there's a grave mistrust, and it works both ways.
No, I think the slaughter plants may be suspicious of me because they don't have a clear understanding of animal welfare and animal rights, and they see the whole of this movement as a big threat to their existence, and simply an underhand way of closing them down, whereas in fact
we don't have anything to hide, but these are the other elements that come into play. So if there's other ways that we can help you learn about the meat packing industry, we're here to help you try to do that.
How hard is it to get into a slaughterhouse today?
Very hard.
Today's food production systems and the people that are involved have nothing to hide about what we're doing. Every effort is made to ensure, first of all, safety of the people and the animals, and for health reasons, the sanitary elements of what is necessary to produce safe food. Because of those two things, walking into a slaughter plant unannounced just can't be done.
Hi.
You're under arrest for break and enter. You have the right to retain and instruct counsel without delay. You can call any lawyer if you wish, and legal aid duty counsel is available to provide legal advice to you without any charge, and they can explain the legal aid plan to you. Do you understand that? And turn off your camera, ma'am.
Is it illegal to have the camera going?
Well, you jumped into a compound and videotaped something. I'm seizing the...
In May, she was thrown in jail overnight when she tried to film a dead cow outside the Intercontinental Packers meat plant. What sort of response have you had to all of this from the industry, the meat industry?
Oh, take me down. I'm gonna bury my shame. Oh, take me down, down to bury my shame. Once you walk beside me, but now I walk alone. Committed you to memory with all the rest I've known. Pull myself together, hold my head up high. I'm going down to bury my shame so that I learn to cry. Oh, take me down. I'm going to bury my shame. Oh, take me down, down to. Oh, take me down. I'm going to bury my shame. Oh, take me down, down to bury my shame.